This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is November 29th, 2020. I'm producer Pat, and with me is Christina Roche.
Hey, everyone.
We've got 3 segments for you today. Since December 1st is Giving Tuesday, we are rerunning Darren's segment from last year on donating effectively. Adam brings us a segment on pyramids in Antarctica, but first, Christina, albums seem really long these days. What's up with that?
I'm sure I've mentioned before, Darren and Adam are quite fascinated by the inner workings of the music industry. They often ask Pat and I to cover more music-related topics on TRC. Now, while science communication is our passion, many of you who listen to the show regularly know that Pat and I have long-standing careers in the music industry.
Although I'm mostly retired now.
Pat on the creative music side, me on the business promo and PR side. So here you go, Darren and Adam. It's an early Christmas for you. Today I'm going to talk about LPs, short for long play records. Some of you may remember the olden days when you could carve out 35 or so minutes, put up your feet and listen to your favorite record from front to back. Now, to say the way we consume music has changed over the years, huge understatement. Now, let's take the Beatles as an example, since they're so well known and my favorite band growing up. The Beatles' first full-length album, Please Please Me, released in 1963, clocks in around 32 minutes. Their 1964 release, A Hard Day's Night, is probably their shortest LP, coming in around 30 minutes. In contrast, as their sound and recording techniques evolved, and there was a shift from the hit single, so to speak, to concept albums, Abbey Road, released in 1969, was 47 minutes long. And yes, the White Album is 93 minutes long, but it's a double album, so don't at me, any pedantic Beatle fans. We're talking single full-length records here. In fact, some of the best-selling albums of all time are around 45 minutes long. Springsteen's Born in the USA, Prince's Purple Rain, Michael Jackson's Thriller. More on that in a moment. Fast forward to CDs changing the game, since they could hold around 75 minutes of music. Eminem's 2013 The Marshall Mathers 2 LP came in around 78 minutes, one of the longer hip-hop records at the time. Now, this was before streaming services really took off in the mid-2010s. Hip-hop artist and Toronto Raptors ambassador Drake released his record Views in 2016, a whopping 1 hour and 22 minutes long. It became Drake's most commercially successful album, selling over 7 million certified copies worldwide. Hip-hop trio Migos' record Culture 2, released in 2018, had 24 tracks and clocked in at 1 hour and 46 minutes. To give some of you boomers or Gen Xers a little perspective, here's how reporter Elias Late puts it in Rolling Stone. Quote, "That's long enough to listen to all of Pink Floyd's The Wall and still make it more than halfway through The Dark Side of the Moon." Now, Culture 2 debuted at #1 on the Billboard album chart. I should probably pause for a second and explain what the Billboard charts are for those who don't know. Media company Billboard tabulates the relative popularity of songs each week in specific genres like rock, R&B, country, etc., or the top songs in all of the genres, and publishes the results in Billboard magazine. Data used includes sales, streams, or airplay, and as with the Hot 100 chart, all 3 are used to compile the chart. Streams, individual song purchases are included along with album sales in tabulating charts. Okay, so what's going on? Is there an ideal length of an album? Why are albums so long now? The most straightforward answer, I guess, is, well, because they can. In the 70s, pre-CDs, artists and labels didn't have much of a choice regarding the length of their record. As writer Paul Cantor explains, a 33 1/3 LP could technically only hold 45 minutes of audio split between the 2 sides. 33 1/3 refers to the speed at which the record rotates on the turntable, which is 33.3 times per minute. Not to mention recording was pretty expensive, unlike today when you can have a home studio at arm's length in your home. Am I right, Pat? You would know.
100%, yes.
Yeah. Now, you may have guessed that the popularity of streaming has changed the rules, so to speak. Hugh McIntyre wrote a 2017 Forbes article titled, "How Longer Albums and Streaming Giants Are Manipulating the Charts." As he recounts, Billboard updated how it tabulated its weekly rankings of song popularity, finally allowing streams to be included in the charts. Some people protested, actually, but considering streaming had become the most popular way to consume music, it makes sense. They had to do it. Now, here's an excerpt from McIntyre's article breaking it down. According to Billboard, an artist can now earn one album sale or equivalent sale, which is a more appropriate term, by doing one of the following things. And just a side note, album equivalent unit is a measurement that the music industry uses to define the consumption of music that equals the purchase of one album copy. Okay?
So a number of streams equals an album sale?
We'll get there,
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Selling an album, it can be in any format, CD, digital, or vinyl, as long as it is the entire package. Selling 10 digital tracks from that album. If one fan buys the first 5 songs, another fan purchases 3 random tunes they love from that same record, and 2 other casual listeners only snap up the lead single, all of those sales come together to equal one full equivalent album sale.
Okay.
You with me?
Yep.
And 3, streaming. Now, Billboard has updated its criteria since McIntyre's article was written. He uses an older stat for the number of plays of a song featured on a specific record that can count as a sale to its cumulative total. It was 1,500. In the summer of 2018, Billboard announced greater emphasis to be given to paid subscription streams like YouTube. Now, to put it very simply for the sake of time, because it's quite convoluted, the Billboard 200 now includes 2 tiers of on-demand audio streams. Tier 1, paid subscription audio streams equating 1,250 streams to one album unit, and Tier 2, ad-supported audio streams equating 3,750 streams to one album unit. Now, these changes to how charts are tabulated definitely incentivize longer albums. Malcolm Manswell, who's a marketing manager at Atlantic Records, told Rolling Stone, quote, "Stacking albums with extra songs is a strategic way to achieve certain goals." Now, case in point, longer albums mean more streams, which can lead to a #1 debut or gold and platinum awards for sales. It's a way many bigger artists can dominate the charts. And obviously, all of these stats sound really great on a press release, right?
It's a little bit strange when you say 1,200 and some odd streams equals one album sale. I've bought many albums that I didn't listen to the songs, any of the songs, or all of the songs 1,200 times in total.
Right.
Yeah.
String 35 is a great blog. Its focus is more country music, but it does really great analysis. And it has a fantastic analysis called "Why Do Albums Keep Getting Longer?" if you want to do a deep dive on the topic. And of course, the link will be in the show notes. Now, as they explain, in the age of streaming, singles are prioritized over complete albums as attention spans have shortened and music consumption rapidly diversifies. In response to this, labels have chopped the album up into a series of singles to be consumed rapidly, then discarded. This keeps their artists in the recently released playlists and maintains buzz around albums for long periods of time. I mean, in truth, this isn't so new. For years, labels have re-released projects, as you know, Pat, as deluxe versions to extend the shelf life, so to speak.
In some ways, the release of a single is not a new thing. I mean, we had 45s when there was LPs, but it's certainly more like the album is almost kind of dead in some ways now, and it's all about singles.
Right. Now, on the flip side, the more the merrier as far as fans are concerned. President of Glassnote Records, Daniel Glass, told Rolling Stone, "I don't think it's a sales trick as much as a response to audience behavior. Hip-hop has been more in touch with their fans than anybody in the last few years. And indeed, to his point, R&B and rap genres are the most popular, making up 29.1% of on-demand streams." There's also ticket bundling. Like a lot of artists these days, when I guess they were touring, we're not touring right now, would bundle their new record with their concert ticket. So if you bought a ticket to their show, you got the record, and that record counts as a sale to the overall sales for that artist. Right. So in truth, many popular albums aren't much longer than the days of Thriller. 45 minutes still seems to be a sweet spot. I don't know, maybe that's our attention span. I don't know. Paul Cantor also explains that it's in part to legal stuff like contracts, where record labels stipulate they will only pay mechanical royalties on 10 to 12 of the songs. Now, Pat, could you explain what mechanical royalties are?
So mechanical royalties, it used to be you were paid out a royalty every time a physical copy was created of a piece of work. Now I presume it includes stream.
Yeah, any copy, digital copy. Now, before I let you go, Pat, you want to guess the record for the most songs on a digital album?
Oh, I have no idea.
Take a wild guess.
45.
Now, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the most songs on a digital album is, drumroll, 298.
Oh my.
Which was achieved by UK's The Pocket Gods with their album titled 300 times 30, My Life as a Playlist. It's released in 2019. Note, The Pocket Gods have held this title twice before.
Wow. So they put out records with hundreds of songs on them.
Yes. I did a quick Goog. It's an indie band. Apparently BBC's John Peel was a fan, but I don't know anything else about them.
Yeah. It's hard to say what kind of music that they're putting out, so it could be just about anything, right?
Yes.
Like they could be 30 seconds long or something. Well, I'll have to look into them a little bit.
Yes, but that's, some artists' entire discography, 298 songs.
100%, yeah. Well, thanks for that, Christina. And with that, we will hand things over to Adam and Darren. I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and we will talk to you next week.
Stay classy, not smartassy, and stay safe.
A few weeks ago, I stumbled upon a video on the internet showing some skydivers into Antarctica, which showed what appeared to be pyramids in the snow. Now, I don't recall how I stumbled upon it, but the caption I'd seen with it said, "Whoa, is Antarctica being declassified?" And there were a bunch of emojis in there because it was a super professional tweet. Now, I hadn't heard about this before, but a quick search showed me that this was actually a big deal a few years ago when these same pyramids were found on Google Maps. So while my first question was whether or not the video was real, it seems to be that yes, it was real in that it wasn't doctored in some way. What's seen actually exists, though that's not to say that it is what it appears to be. So, there are pyramids in Antarctica? I saw a couple of decent articles which looked at this on Snopes and IFL Science. The Snopes article dates from 2017 and discussed viral images of Antarctica showing the pyramids from space as seen from Google Earth. The claim is that the 3 pyramids in Antarctica could end up rewriting our entire history because it's a mystery how they could have gotten there.
Are they going to write it in the snow?
I guess carving words in stone. That is the best way to have a message that lasts really long. I learned that from a very good book. So the idea here is that Antarctica was not always this far from the equator. So it wasn't always this cold. In fact, this is true. 100 million years ago, there was vegetation on the continent. So the conclusion some drew was that 100 million years ago, when people could have lived in Antarctica or in that area where those pyramids are, someone must have lived there to build the pyramids. But that doesn't really line up with the age of humans, since there was nothing resembling a modern human on Earth 100 million years ago. Also, there are claims that 100 million years ago, Antarctica was close to the equator, but this is also false. The continent was more or less where it is now, but climatic factors caused a warmer period. Also, the so-called pyramids in the Antarctic are 10 times higher than the Great Pyramids of Giza, which were themselves a considerable feat to build. Despite claims that the pyramids in Egypt date back to 10,000 years or more, the pyramids were actually built in the 4th dynasty between 2580 and 2560 BC. So those pyramids aren't actually 10,000 years old, and the pyramids in Antarctica are claimed to be 100 million years old. That's 10,000 years times 10,000. Like, this factor is huge, right? So it's hard to wrap our heads around such large numbers, but the time from now until when these pyramids were actually built is fairly long. So multiply that actual period by 40,000 to get the 100 million years number. For context, the mass extinction, which wiped out the dinosaurs, generally thought to be caused by a massive asteroid which collided with the Earth, was 66 million years ago. Mm-hmm. So this idea that someone, probably not humans, built these pyramids while they were literally dinosaurs roaming the Earth is a bit far-fetched.
Right. Obviously, the dinosaurs built them.
Maybe. So it doesn't rule it out completely. Maybe it was aliens. Maybe it was time travelers.
I prefer you say you're not saying it's aliens, so then I can say, but it's aliens.
But it's aliens.
But it's time travelers. We're going to stick that in?
I'm just saying, like, these are, if we're going for really far-fetched things, these are more plausible than it was humans 100 million years ago.
Maybe it was the cat that was carved into the side of the mountain that cats built the pyramid, and this was a way of honoring them.
Cat, colloquial, not a domesticated cat. Maybe it was some sort of intelligent species, which evolved from dinosaurs, like the Voth from Star Trek Voyager. Of course, all of these explanations are considerably more complex than alternatives, so we need to give them the plausibility that they deserve. Obviously, all of these rely on things that we can't explain. It's of course not plausible that anything resembling a modern human built these 100 million years ago. There are alternate explanations, but that's not what the prevailing crank theory suggests. It's certainly more plausible that a more recent civilization actually traveled to Antarctica while it was near the South Pole with similar climate that we have now, using some advanced technology, and managed to keep themselves warm while working. There's no evidence that this is the case, but it's simply a much less far-fetched explanation than someone having done it when dinosaurs roamed the Earth. You don't have to factor in time travel or aliens, or you can factor in aliens, but it's not the same aliens.
You might want to factor the aliens, but not heavily weighted.
Yeah. So what is a simpler, more plausible explanation for these pyramids? They're mountains that look like pyramids, but they're still mountains. That's kind of boring. But they really look like pyramids. Well, yes, they really look like pyramids. And this is rare, but it's not unheard of. There are other examples of such pyramid-shaped mountains on Earth. The IFL Science article on this phenomenon mentions two: the Matterhorn in the Alps and Mount Belenstindor in Iceland. While I see similarities, I don't think the Matterhorn looks quite as pyramid-like, and really it does seem more natural and mountain-looking. But Mount Belenstindor, on the other hand, really does look pyramid-shaped, so not completely implausible. So is there a conspiracy theory to hide the existence of these pyramids?
I think it's interesting that people are thinking about the pyramid shape, which is, one could say, more naturally available to geological formations and environments. If it was, say, like a rhombus, then I'd be like, well, that's interesting. Now, it still could be. It still could be. I think it's less likely. Pyramidal seems a bit more naturally occurring.
Like if there's a skyscraper in Antarctica, that would be impressive.
Well, this is a parallelogram in Antarctica. Oh, well, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
How did that get
there? So is there a conspiracy theory to hide these? Now, some context might help. These are part of the Ellsworth Mountains, a mountain range which is over 400 kilometers long. Pretty long. The video and claims seem to suggest that these are just pyramids in the middle of nowhere, but this is hardly the case. These are technically nunatak, which are peaks of rock sticking above a glacier or ice sheet. One of these so-called pyramids in particular seems to be much more obviously pyramid-like than the others. And these have been known since a British Antarctic expedition from 1910 to 1913.
Oh. Are you saying that's more recent than 100 million years ago?
Quite.
Okay.
They dubbed the mountain the Pyramid, and it's been referred to as such for over a century. To suggest that some conspiracy exists to hide this pyramid from us is a bit silly, since it's clearly been referred to as a pyramid since it was first discovered by what we could call modern humans, not with whatever would have existed 100 million years ago. There aren't pyramids in the Antarctic. They are simply pyramid-shaped mountains, which may look a bit odd, but are not unheard of elsewhere in the world. They aren't made by humans or any other intelligent species. If they had been, it is impossible that anything close to a human would have made them while dinosaurs still roamed the Earth, and any species capable of having done it back then could certainly have done it more recently, equipped with such high-tech tools as winter clothing and heaters, as opposed to, say, time machine, spaceship, something wild like that.
I think this makes the most sense, Adam. This is a good explanation. Because if you were around a humanoid when there's dinosaurs, clearly you're going to be riding dinosaurs.
For sure.
That's where you spend a lot of your time. We're riding the dinosaurs, maybe a pterodactyl. This is where you're going to spend your time. You're not going to have time to construct pyramids. Tis that time again for what is becoming a yearly segment, me talking to you about how to give to effective charities. To be fair, though, previous segments were called Effective Donating, and this segment is called Donating Effectively. So obviously it's completely different.
Oh, yes.
That said, I don't just want to repeat the past couple of years, so I'll do a quick summary of some of the key ideas about making effective charitable donations and spend a bit more time on describing the charity evaluation website givewell.org, and then explore whether and why one should give at all. But first, Giving Tuesday was started in 2012 by the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan and some other organizations as a response of sorts to Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Many people are joyous about acquiring cheap electronics and other goods. But what if the focus was about helping others for a day? I know, weird. So you'll see Giving Tuesday on social media coming up on December 3rd, and feel free to embrace the social movement and solidarity and give back. But how to make an effective donation? Well, here's a quick rundown of some of the more detail that I provided on episodes 526 or 477. Number 1, focus on effectiveness, not just on the overhead of an organization. Number 2, focus on a couple or even just one charity instead of splitting donations amongst many charities. It increases administrative burden and reduces efficiency. Number 3, if you're donating to a large organization like Oxfam or the Red Cross, don't restrict your donation to a particular cause or region. It just inhibits them from allocating resources effectively. If you're trusting them in the first place, they know what the needs are. Mm-hmm. Number 4, set up a recurring monthly donation, credit card or bank withdrawal. As, we know we're all human here, wink wink, and sometimes we fail to achieve our goals, whether it be exercise or spending less time on social media, so we can leverage structures to help us do so. Mm-hmm. Number 5, get a tax receipt. This way, you can donate more. Some people think it's more generous to not get a receipt, but with a receipt, you'll get some money back and you could donate that. So don't fall into the emotional trap that leads to bad thinking.
I have to say, Darren, that's one thing that you've said in the past that really, really stuck with me.
Great. And number 6, the most important of all, choose a good charity. This links to the first point, but it's worth discussing in more detail. Now, many people are swayed by advertising or some personal association at work or on the street when someone asks you for money. But what if you really prioritized effectiveness? How would one do such a thing? Where would you start? There's about 86,000 charities in Canada and about 1 million in the United States. Wow. So your random chance of picking a really good one is not high. And if you just come into contact with a charity through some friend or another, who knows what their selection criteria are? Fortunately, other people have thought about this a lot, and they created the organization GiveWell and the related website givewell.org. You can find a link in the show notes, or you can type it into Google. Givewell.org. It was started by 2 hedge fund guys over a decade ago who wanted to donate effectively, but were having trouble finding reliable data on whether various charities actually had the impact they said they did. They were sort of applying the financial and scientific rigor one might use before investing in a company or a technology, but to charity and development. Many charities, at least 10 years ago, were like, we do this is our program, we give out this much money, or we do this thing, which is implied that it does some good. Yeah. But it's not enough just to say you did the thing. Like, what was the impact? Did you have a randomized control trial? How do you know it wouldn't have happened anyway? Yeah. These sorts of things. Over many years, the GiveWell has focused on charities that are most likely to do something good with your donation. The main goal is to do good or reduce suffering. Now, there are long philosophical discussions about how these are not exactly the same thing, but I think for the average person they are, so we'll just stick with that for today. Before I discuss the pros and cons of GiveWell's approach, I want to mention 2 main pillars underlying the edifice. Equality. Basically, everyone on Earth is counted equally. Now, everyone, some sort of personhood, some sort of sentience, but generally speaking, all lives are counted equally. Mm-hmm. And I'm well aware that if there's a physical distance, like a geographical distance, that leads to a psychological distance, and that leads to a moral distance. Yeah. But that's not actually true. That's just an unfortunate quirk of our human psychology. Or fortunate in some domains, but unfortunate in other domains. So if you actually believe people are equal, well then, lives in other countries count just as much as lives in your own country. Also, cause neutrality, or strategic cause prioritization. It's not the cause itself that matters. That's just a proxy for reducing suffering. For example, cancer sure is terrible. Of course it is. But what you care about is someone suffering from cancer. It's the suffering that matters, not the cancer in and of itself. So, cancer is important, but why is it important? To reduce the suffering. Yeah. So why not just focus on reducing suffering? Yeah. And therefore, it doesn't necessarily have to be cancer, it's just whatever can reduce the suffering the most. Mm-hmm. And if there's so much suffering, it makes sense to focus on what can do the most good. GiveWell has a recommendation of top charities linked in the show notes, and you'll notice they seem to involve reducing malaria or intestinal worms or cash transfers. And that links to my above point. I happen to donate money to buy anti-malarial bed nets for people in different countries, and it's not that I care about malaria that much. It's that reducing the risk of people getting malaria seems to be one of the best giving opportunities. If it turned out it was something else, then it would be something else. It's not the malaria itself, it's the reducing of suffering. Now I'm going to quote GiveWell's website, where they say here are the main advantages of their recommendations. Quote, they represent the best opportunities we're aware of to help low-income people with relatively high confidence and relatively short time horizons. If you're looking to give this year and you don't know where to start, we strongly recommend supporting our top charities. Further, Due to the emphasis on thorough vetting, transparency, and following up, our top charities represent excellent learning opportunities, and we feel that one of the most desirable outcomes of giving is learning more that will inform later giving. Supporting our top charities helps GiveWell demonstrate impact and improves our ability to learn, and we are dedicated to sharing what we learn publicly. GiveWell is highly, highly transparent. They tell you about meetings that they've had. You can listen to recorded phone calls. You can actually hear and read about their thinking about why they chose one thing or another. So there's often like internal discussions or debates that companies might have, and they don't share that information publicly. Yeah. GiveWell tends to. They even have a list of the people who work for GiveWell and whether they actually do or do not donate to the charities that GiveWell recommends.
Interesting.
And they provide their reasons. So it's not at all we all support this, therefore everyone who works for us is also supporting it. Not that way at all. Everyone can be independent to as much as they like. Yeah. But there are some disadvantages, and here's quoting GiveWell again. We have strict criteria about what sort of charities we recommend. These criteria are partly about achieving maximum impact, but partly about having recommendations that others can fairly easily be confident in. As well, they say, quote, seeking strong evidence and a straightforward documented case for impact can be in tension with maximizing impact, as argued, and I'd love to post a link from the Open Philanthropy Project, which was incubated at GiveWell. In general, the Open Philanthropy Project focuses on higher risk, high reward returns, while the GiveWell recommendations are as much reliability and certainty as you may have to help someone, as I said, within a relatively short time horizon. Sure. As we know, these things aren't usually together. You're like, well, what's the biggest impact possible with the most reliability? That's not usually how the world works. So GiveWell says that they think there may be many giving opportunities that are better than their top charities, but they actually don't meet the criteria or they're not known to us. Okay. So that's, I think, an important point, which seems obvious, but I think it's important they admit it. There may be something better out there, but we just don't know what it is. Yeah. Now, it's not to say they haven't looked, because they have, but they're trying to acknowledge the nature of uncertainty in the world.
Interesting.
And they also say, even though we believe our top charities are backed by strong evidence, none of the recommendations are a sure thing, and actually some of them have a risk of not doing much good. Now, that's true, but I think they're more of a sure thing than any other charity I've ever come across. So I think it's a relative scale here, where the GiveWell charity seems far more likely to do what it says it's going to do than some other organizations. Sure. I mentioned before the Open Philanthropy Project often focuses on high risk, high reward, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. My suggestion would be just to do so consciously. Don't just sort of haphazardly go about your giving and then maybe retrospectively, after the fact, try to justify why you're doing it. Yeah. It's like, I'm giving to a charity that may not be effective, but you know what? It's because I value high risk, high reward giving. Like, well, maybe your charity's just not that rigorous and effective. Yeah. There are opportunities to explore here. In general, logical, transparent, evidence-based, these are the things that I'm suggesting we value. And this is how GiveWell operates, and is exactly what you'd want if you're trying to maximize doing good, and not just the warm, fuzzy feeling that you might get from helping people. Fuzzy feeling's important. Sometimes without it, you can't do anything. So try to know yourself of how much you need the fuzzy feeling versus something else, but realize that the fuzzy feeling is not itself the doing of good. Yeah. So why give at all? Now, I've not come across an argument that is completely convincing. Otherwise, you would have heard it and you would be giving more. That's how the world works. But the arguments people use to not give more are often easily addressed. First, some people say they have no money. Well, this is clearly the case. If you don't have any money, you should not be donating to charity. Don't go into debt to help people. That's straightforward. If that's the message you're hearing, this is not necessarily aimed at you if you do not have the resources. You have to take care of your basic needs and perhaps your loved ones, right? People often say charity begins at home. You should help people closer to you in your community. Okay, but that goes to what is your notion of equality? Yeah. If you actually think people in your local municipality, province, state are worth more than other people, you can have that belief. I don't think you really want to say it out loud. It sounds a bit odd. And that's how people often act, but it is still the case that it just doesn't make sense.
It may sound a bit odd, but there's probably like 100 ways that people could phrase it to make it not sound odd.
I know.
People do say that almost.
Oh, they certainly do. Also, you could say if his charity begins at home, it doesn't mean I have to end there. There's a nice flip for you.
Interesting.
There's also something called the argument from futility. And this is the idea that because you can't help everyone, you won't help anyone. And when I phrase it like that, you're like, well, that seems silly. It's like, well, I can't do everything, so I won't do anything. It's just a terrible way of thinking. You can't exercise an hour a day. I won't exercise at all forever. No, it doesn't work that way. But being human, we do feel overwhelmed. And when you read about all the suffering, or you just try to onboard how many people are suffering each day from all these different maladies, it can seem overwhelming and it won't matter. But it does matter.
Humans can be very all or nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just sort of rephrasing is like, well, wait, is it better to do something rather than nothing? And to be fair, sometimes it isn't. But if you can find reliable charities, it is actually better to do something. And sort of in your own life or your own family, if someone's sick and you kind of want to help them, maybe you can't entirely solve their problem, but it doesn't mean you can't do something. Yeah. And people naturally very much do this. If a friend of yours, say, does have cancer, you don't think, well, I can't cure the cancer, I won't help them at all. You bring them some food. You try to get them something. It's this natural human tendency. So just try to shift that thinking to the broader global perspective. And trying to have a bit more of an optimistic note, it's never been easier to help people. As much as I said there's a lot of suffering in the world, which there is, things are getting a bit better, see Steven Pinker, and things could even be better, because many times they're still awful. But with that in mind, if you're saddened by the state of the world, you should probably stop reading mainstream news, unless you're following many of them at the same time and following them in depth, and realize that things are getting better in various domains, and you can help people. You don't physically have to go on the ground in a different country and actually do anything. You can just click a few buttons on the internet, and someone else will do it for you. Like, it really is, if you think in the history of the world, how easy it is to make a significant impact in the lives of others, it's incredible. It's amazing. Yeah. Something to reflect on is a question: what else could be more meaningful than reducing suffering?
Darren, one of the 6 points you made, I think, was sign up for a monthly donation. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But we've talked about this previously, or you've talked about this previously, and you've talked about transaction costs. So wouldn't annual donation make more sense because of the transaction costs, or is it simply that by signing up to do it monthly, you're more likely to stick with it?
Great clarification, Pat. I personally don't do a monthly thing. I do an annual lump sum. That may or may not be good for other people. One is that, can you trust yourself to make a lump sum at a certain point each year? Secondly, for different charities, if it's a monthly donation, they can then better allocate their resources, because like, oh, this money's going to come in each month. And the lump sum, unless it's a very large organization, depending on the size of it, it might just not throw things off, but they may not be able to anticipate it as well as if they could if it was a monthly thing. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Every time there's a monthly transaction, it might sort of add up. And for larger sums, like what I might try to donate, I'll usually send them a check, because that's much cheaper than, say, credit card. Oh, okay. But it really sort of fits to the individual's preference of how they might go about things. Some people I know, they actually think, oh, that monthly donation is the most important thing I do that month. And they get to think about, like, oh, every month I'm doing this thing. I'm the person who does something good every month. Yeah. And I thought about that. Maybe I should switch to monthly, just because, like, okay, I did this month. It's really just different ways of thinking about it to try to make yourself understand the impact you're actually having. Yep. And that's the quirky thing about this, that I could buy bed nets for an entire village, and I have, compared to friend of the show, Jim Davies, who told me a story that he was walking home in some old shoes, and he saw some guy who was homeless who needed shoes, and he asked him if he wanted his shoes. So Jim gave the homeless guy his shoes, and then he walked the rest of the way barefoot. So in this context, one guy who I don't know got shoes. I didn't do it. I heard about it from a friend of mine, and that makes me feel good. Actually, it might make me feel better than helping an entire village not get malaria. And that's because my brain is a stupid monkey brain. And we value logic on the show, so I have to consciously tell myself, of course, stopping or trying to reduce the likelihood of all these people getting malaria is more important than this one pair of shoes, while at the same time observing the effect it has on me.
Yeah, but one little visit to that village and you'd feel differently, right? You'd see how
maybe
the
or maybe
impact of
not.
that is.
Well, I would hope so, because then there might be more personal connection. And that is one of the tricky things with donating overseas.
That's my point, Pat. Personal connection.
At the same time, in this particular example, what I'm trying to do is almost like create the non-existence of malaria, right? So it's not that I'm helping a particular problem. I'm reducing the likelihood of the problem ever happening. It's sort of like, in a way, the bad understanding of how vaccines work. They've been so successful, people don't realize we need them. Yeah. And so you're like, look at all the non-suffering from vaccines. It's understanding non-events is also very tricky for humans.
And Against Malaria actually tries to do a good job. We bought this many nets for this place on this date.
Yes, you're correct, Pat. The Against Malaria Foundation, which is the one we're talking about, does allow you to track your donation, where they talk about where the nets might have been bought, the time, and then what country they're going to be deployed in and how many people will be affected, which is very useful. And there's no doubt that's very helpful. Again, it's just, we have to admit, it does require a bit more cognitive work. And of course, that's often what the right thing to do requires.
And speaking of stupid monkey brains, I mean, it's funny how the nuance makes a difference. You can say you've decreased the malaria, whatever, by this much, but if you say your your donation has affected this many people, that seems more emotionally impactful to me.
Which we saw a lot in the 80s and the 90s, when it was like you're donating to a village, but you actually are sponsoring a child, and you got a picture of that child, and they wrote you a letter.
Yeah.
Yes, it is tricky to do the, on average, I've saved several lives this year. Like, well, okay, that's not quite the same as knowing you have, but the stats do bear it out, and what could be more meaningful.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.